I do want to warn that this video is very disturbing and that viewer discretion is advised. I do want to start this video by stating I am turning off the monetization for this video. As all serial killers and true crime stories are terrible, this next story is so horrific, and due to the victims involved, I refuse to profit in any way. Nathaniel Bar-Jonah, born David Paul Brown, was a pedophiliac and hemophiliac, known for serial sexual assaults, abductions, and attempted murder. He was also believed by many to have been a serial killer and a cannibal. Bar-Jonah was born as David Paul Brown in the city of Worcester, Massachusetts on February 15th, 1957. Starting at the age of 6, he would inflict harm on himself by picking at scabs until his skin would fester. Then he proceeded to suck on the blood from the wound. His mother was called multiple times from the school to tell her that this habit was upsetting both the children and the teachers. 1 year later, in late July 1964, Bar-Jonah invited a 5-year-old neighbor girl to his basement, claiming he had an Ouija board that could predict the future. Once inside, he attempted to strangle her until her screams alerted Bar-Jonah's mother, and she rescued her, but Bar-Jonah apparently got off with little to no punishment. At the age of 13, he lured another 6-year-old boy from the neighborhood to a hill outside, claiming that he wanted to go sledding with him. Once they got to the secluded hill, Bar-Jonah sexually assaulted him. During his senior year of high school, Bar-Jonah impersonated a police officer for the first time and abducted 8-year-old Richard O'Connor while he was on his way to school, sexually assaulting and strangling him inside his car. A neighbor observed the abduction and the assault from a window and called the police. Officers rescued O'Connor when he was unconscious and almost dead. Bar-Jonah was arrested and sentenced to an unknown number of months of probation. Just a few days before his graduation, as well as the conclusion of his sentence, Bar-Jonah drove to Hartford, Connecticut and impersonated as a police officer again. I usually do not do commentary in the middle of my videos, but this punishment for his crime is absolutely disgusting, and this slap on the wrist only enabled him more. What a complete slap in the face for his victims. I didn't even want to tell this story, but it's a good educational piece. As a parent, be as strict as possible. Always monitor them, because you have monsters like this that still exist in this world today. Anyway, this time, after impersonating the police officer, he abducted a 9-year-old girl and proceeded to sexually assault her in his car, but he threw her out soon afterward when she started to convulse and vomit. A witness got the license plate of his car, and Bar-Jonah was arrested for the new incident. However, the report on this arrest never got back to Bar-Jonah's probation officer, and he was released from probation in May 1976. With a letter thanking him for his cooperation. On September 24th, 1977, Bar-Jonah impersonated a FBI agent and abducted 2 boys coming out of a movie theater. Bar-Jonah, who weighed 375 pounds at the time, left one of the boys in the car's trunk while he took the other one away and simultaneously tried to strangle and suffocate him with his weight until he thought he had killed him. The boy actually pretended to be dead and was able to maintain the act even when Bar-Jonah started blowing cigarette ashes on his face. When Bar-Jonah left, the boy ran away and reported him to the police. Bar-Jonah was arrested again and the other boy was rescued. This time, Bar-Jonah was convicted of attempted murder and was sentenced to between 18 and 22 years in prison. And I am not surprised that he did no time in prison, given the fact that many of my stories on true crime, law enforcement absolutely dropped the ball, and in this case, it is no different. Instead, he was transferred to Bridgewater State Hospital, where he told psychiatrists repeatedly about having sexual fantasies involving murder, torture, dissection, and cannibalism. He was released on July 1991. A month later, he saw a 7-year-old boy sitting inside a car outside a post office in Oxford, Massachusetts. Bar-Jonah entered the vehicle and sat over the boy, but fled after other civilians saw him. Bar-Jonah's description was recognized by one of the police officers who arrested him 15 years before, and he was arrested again. Bar-Jonah claimed that he entered the vehicle to get out of the rain and that he intended to wait for the driver to return and ask him to take him home. As for the boy, he said that he did not know he was there, so any possible injury was accidental. However, he later admitted that his intent was to kill the boy. For this, Bar-Jonah was given 2 years of probation, under the condition that he move in with his mother to Great Falls, Montana, and never return to Massachusetts again. This is utterly ridiculous what I'm saying right now. In Great Falls, Bar-Jonah started collecting toys and memorabilia, mostly Star Wars related, and organizing yard sales that drew massive crowds of children. His first brush with the law in Montana was in December 1993, when he was accused of molestation by an 8-year-old boy who he was babysitting. Bar-Jonah defended himself by stating that if he had done that in reality, he would have killed the boy. The case was dropped after his lawyer claimed his right to a speedy trial had been violated. On February 10, 1996, 10-year-old Zach Ramsey disappeared on his way to school. Witnesses saw an off-white vehicle almost running Ramsey over, and later recounted he was crying and appeared to be followed by a heavy-set man around the time he disappeared. Detective Bill Belushi, who investigated the December 1993 case, was assigned to investigate Ramsey's disappearance. Though he was provided with a list of registered sex offenders living in the area by the FBI, Belushi discarded it and centered his suspicion on Bar-Jonah, who wasn't registered. After an unsuccessful police attempt to enter the home shared by Bar-Jonah and his mother, Belushi solicited a search warrant of the property, but he was turned down. He later found that Bar-Jonah had access to his mother's off-white Toyota Corolla, that he had the day off, and that he was seen standing in an alley just before Ramsey entered it. Bar-Jonah was also wearing a dark blue jacket that day, similar to that of a police officer's, was in constant close proximity of Ramsey, and had mentioned Ramsey's name to an acquaintance a few days before he disappeared. Belushi was unsuccessful in getting a new search warrant. Sometime later, Bar-Jonah moved out of his mother's house. 2 days later, Belushi was granted a second search warrant for any documents and photographic material. Besides the albums, they also found several lists of boys' names later identified as boys from Bar-Jonah's youth in Massachusetts, including 3 that he molested. One had an entry for Zachary Ramsey next to the word died. 3,500 photographs of children, multiple news clippings about Ramsey's disappearance, and undeveloped film containing sexual images of Bar-Jonah and 3 unidentified boys were also recovered. In addition, police discovered a book written in code which was cracked and revealed to be a cookbook with recipes such as Little Boy Pot Pie, French Fried Kid, and Little Boy Stew. Finally, police found a large, stained section of plywood in Bar-Jonah's garage, which was scrubbed with bleach and also struck several times with a meat cleaver as if it had been used as a cutting board. A luminal test in the same room revealed that the word Tita had once been written on the floor. This was tentatively linked to James Teta, a 15-year-old boy who was found sexually assaulted and strangled in Rindge, New Hampshire in 1973. Further research seemed to have confirmed the officers' fears that Bar-Jonah had killed and cooked Ramsey and possibly other children. It was learned that in the days after Ramsey's disappearance, Bar-Jonah held cookouts for his neighbors in which he served quote-unquote deer burgers that tasted strange, once saying that he had hunted, killed, butchered, and wrapped the meat personally. So yes, not only did he eat children himself, but he fed them to unsuspecting people. Bar-Jonah did not own a gun or a hunting license, and credit card records suggested that he stopped buying food for a month after Ramsey disappeared. A former roommate of Bar-Jonah had seen a pair of bloody gloves and soiled boys' clothing matching Ramsey's at Bar-Jonah's apartment. Bar-Jonah had also surprised people several times by bringing up Ramsey, including one time when he said that Ramsey would never be found because he had been chopped up and the parts scattered in different places. Finally, hair that resembled a human's was found inside Bar-Jonah's meat grinder, and an excavation at a former residence uncovered 21 bone fragments belonging to a boy between 8 and 13 years old. The house's pipes could not be examined because the neighbors who moved in afterward had changed them due to constantly being clogged. DNA from the hair and bones belonged to 2 different African American males, neither of whom was Ramsey. Ramsey's mother later refused to believe that her son was dead or that Bar-Jonah was in any way related to his disappearance. A psychic convinced Ramsey's mother that he was living in Italy. She threatened to defend Bar-Jonah if he was ever brought to trial for her son's murder. Eventually, the charges related to Ramsey's disappearance were dropped, and the police focused on other possible victims. 2 names in a list belonged to 2 boys who lived in the same apartment building as Bar-Jonah and who were in his photographic film. One of the boys confirmed that Bar-Jonah invited them to a sleepover and then sexually assaulted them, but the other boy visited Bar-Jonah in jail and wrote to him saying that he was his friend and that he had never harmed him. Nevertheless, he was charged with sexual assault, aggravated kidnapping, and assaults with a deadly weapon. Police stated that Bar-Jonah's weight was a deadly weapon because he would practice erotic asphyxia on one of the boys in the kitchen. He was convicted and sentenced in 2002 to 130 years in prison without the possibility of parole. On April 13, 2008, Bar-Jonah was found dead in his cell from a heart attack related to obesity. 3 years later, Ramsey's father had him declared legally dead over the opposition of his mother. This was a tough one to get through. Anything involving kids is difficult. I used to think true crime was glorifying these monsters, but more awareness needs to go out about the monsters that live amongst us and still do, and let these videos be an education for all of us to never let your guard down, especially when it comes to your kids. There are many stories on Dahmer, but I never heard of this man, and in many ways, this case is worse than Dahmer because Dahmer's victims found justice. This man went on to end the lives of many children and not be convicted of it, but only for the sexual assault. Thank you all so much for watching, and the only thing I will ever ask from any one of you is to please subscribe and hit that notification button. Once again, thank you.